church school politics can be a bit of a headache sometimes. I can still be a person of faith while still respecting those who don't believe the same way that I do. Lord, do you want me to be here? Like, can I do this? Hello guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Jen and I make faith, lifestyle, and teaching videos. And in today's video, I'm finally going to unpack how the Lord led me to be a public high school English teacher. My educational background was a little bit varied. I actually went to a public elementary school from 1st to 6th grade. I actually did private Christian school for kindergarten. And then after elementary school, I went to a private Christian school that was connected to my church. Now, after high school, I decided to go to a private Christian college, and after college, I actually stayed on to that college to actually get my master's degree. So my bachelor's degree was in English education. Science was my second teaching field, but I learned after my internship that I love learning about science, but I am not a science teacher. So I actually stayed on at the college during my graduate assistant studies years and taught freshman English at the college for those 2 years. So those are my first 2 years of teaching experience. After those 2 years of experience, I ended up moving up in the Baltimore, Maryland area and taught at a private Christian school there for about 2.5 years. And I find that after I taught at my college for a couple years, I was really kind of wondering. I was like, am I going to enjoy teaching college students better compared to high schoolers? Now, because it was a private Christian school that I taught at in Maryland, it was not abnormal for me to teach multiple grades, because the school, the high school in particular, maybe had 200 kids, maybe, if I'm being generous. So during my 2.5 years, one of those years, I'm pretty sure I taught 8th through 12th grade. And then another one of those years and a half, I taught 9th through 12th grade. So I did learn that I love teaching secondary better than on the college level, mostly because we got to stay with those students for the entire year compared to just having students for a semester. So I found that I really enjoyed connecting with students over the course of the year instead of just for a semester. But the reason why I have a half year in there is because in the midst of that time, I had reconnected with a college friend that I had met during my graduate studies years, and he and I were dating, then got engaged, and I was gonna marry this guy. So that half year ended up being because I wanted to finish at least half the year and then move back down to Florida to kind of settle myself a little bit there and then get married. So that's why I had that half year. So in the interim, maybe you could call it, so that time frame between like January till the end of July even of 2022, I was actually working in a more corporate kind of setting as a kind of content writer, copywriter at the same place that my husband worked. And once I learned that copywriting, content writing has basically no passion in it for me, that is where I realized that I really wanted to go back to teaching. And the Lord, I really feel, orchestrated this out so well. Obviously, everything he does is good in his own way, but at the same job where I learned that I wanted to go back to teaching, there were a couple friends who had connections to the county that my husband and I lived in. Connections only in saying like, hey Jen, have you ever thought about teaching in a public school? Because the county just put out their kind of list of needs and here's how you can check it out. So that was really interesting because I had thought about teaching in the public school, but never really enough to try to figure out how it worked to even apply there. And when I had moved back down to Florida, there weren't really any Christian schools in the area that I wanted to apply to. I realized that church school politics can be a bit of a headache sometimes. So I was like, why not give public schools a try? And so I went to that link that the friends had shared with me. And it was an online system, actually. You basically fill out an online resume, submit it, click the different schools that you want to send your application to, and you just kind of wait for those schools to reach out to you. And the first school that reached out to me was actually the school that I'm currently at. It was very fast, actually. I dare say they reached out to me within at least 48 hours of the window closing for applying to that specific position. And I had one interview, totally great, had another interview, also totally great, and before I knew it, they offered me my particular position. And that was great and all, but then I started to slightly panic because I was like, whoa, I can have this position at this public high school just like that? I learned that in the state of Florida, there's such a thing called a temporary certification. Now, I know that a bunch of different states have this, but in my application process, of course, I had to request for my transcripts to be sent to the State of Florida Department of Education. And they did say I qualified for temporary certification, which currently now technically lasts like 5 years. So my temporary certification doesn't expire until June of 2027. Now, don't get me wrong, I really do want to get my official certifications before then, but I was just very intrigued because I was like, I went to a private Christian college. They're gonna let me do this? Really? And the more I learn now, the more I'm like, wow, it's not just private Christian schools that need teachers. All of the United States really needs teachers. So I prayed about it because it sounded wonderful, because the particular position that they offered me was one where I partially taught students in what's called the pre-IB program, the Pre-International Baccalaureate program, which basically is really geared toward any students who are high achieving enough to have more rigorous classes that will help provide for college funding after graduation. So I've learned that it's really, this particular program is almost like a private school within a public school. And so the position was partially that, but then partially teaching general education students, which I was really excited about too. But here's the thing, I prayed about it a lot and I was thinking, the biggest concern that I had was about how the school approached students who might identify as another gender. And personally, as a Christian, I have found, and I tell this to so many people who ask me this too, because I feel like that's an underlying question that a lot of people have in general about like, what is it like? So as a Christian, I have found a lot of peace in recognizing that I will love each and every student that walks through the doors of my classroom, or that I even just interact with, that I don't even know. And if a student were to say, oh yeah, this is my name, these are my pronouns, I will call the student by that name. I try to take it as similar to a nickname. People go by nicknames all the time, and some of those nicknames hardly seem connected to the given name of the student at all. So I call them by the name, but if the student goes by different pronouns, then I say, okay, thanks for letting me know. And then I do my best to just avoid using pronouns with that student in general. But at the same time, I can still be a person of faith while still respecting those who don't believe the same way that I do. So I try to avoid using pronouns with that student or those students in general. And let me be on the record to say that even within my 2 years of teaching at this particular school, I have had maybe a small handful of students who do identify that way. And those students often are some of the sweetest, kindest students that I have ever interacted with. And I want to show God's love to them and to anybody else who's my student. But it is the pronouns, it is the biological sex of humans in general to where the Lord has convicted me about not necessarily affirming in that way, if that makes sense. So all that to say that whole phenomenon of interacting with students who identify differently, generally speaking, was what I was concerned about, because I'm like, Lord, do you want me to be here? Like, can I do this? So truly, after praying a lot about it, I talked with administration, had a really good talk with them. I had a lot of peace about accepting the position, and I did. I will say that since I have accepted the position at my current school, it has been a wild ride. As I was trying to scour the internet for a public high school English teacher, I really couldn't find one who was a Christian, you know? And the questions that I had about, is it possible, like, can you be a person of faith in the public school system? That was really the question I had. And based on my experience, the answer is yes. And God has given me peace about being a public high school English teacher until He leads me otherwise, or until the state of Florida does some crazy things to where I feel as if I couldn't be a person of faith teaching in the public school system. Now, don't get me wrong, obviously, I know that my job is to teach English. It's not to teach religion. It's not to push my religion on any of my students. But that doesn't mean that I can't teach in the public school because I'm a Christian. I hope that makes sense. I hope that that was helpful and encouraging to any of you out there. Please like, comment, and subscribe. If you haven't yet, please put down any questions in the comments that you might have for me, and I would be most happy to answer them. Thank you guys again for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video.